Okay guys, let's talk about a very common, not mistake, but a common scenario that lots of you sort of suffer from and maybe don't really understand the ways to claw back the mistake that you perhaps have made to make good of the situation. Now, allow me back for me. Okay, if I'm in side control, the position I'm talking about is when I've maybe passed my opponent's guard and I've come into what I can now deem as an advantageous position or superior position. I'm on top, I'm away from the legs, and I'm in side control. Okay, so I've passed the guard and I've come round. When I get to this position, he's hidden his arm and he's almost defending his own head. Okay, so in terms of the head position, if we spin this way, you can see that he has his hand over the top of his head, which is mitigating my ability to control his head. I've got no control over his upper centre if I can't control his head. And every time I try to pummel my arm through there, he's just going to almost follow me with his forearm to stop me to get in. And if I go underneath, he'll just keep that hand where it is, and it doesn't enable me to get deep enough. So I'm not able to control his head. So this is one issue, but not the main one we're talking about tonight. The one we're talking about, even though he's still got that as I pass his guard, is this hand here. So he's turned into me, I've passed his guard, and I've landed in this position. So I haven't got control of his head, and you can see his arm, just reach over my back a little bit, I've lost the ability to control him after the pass. So essentially I have side control without the control. Okay, so we have to understand that if this underhook is lost, and in this position, this particular position, very much like half guard, underhook is king. Okay? If he's able to use that underhook to get deep, he's going to flare, he's going to come up, he's going to attack my legs, he's going to reach, but all of a sudden, that really good position I have, being side control top, is lost in an instant because I wasn't aware of the dangers of that underhook. Okay? Now, when we arrive in this side control position, we have two areas that we have to control. Okay, the area around his neck, where a sort of neck brace would be after a car accident, to sort of allow you to come out of a whiplash kind of scenario, and the other area is under his armpit. When we're passing guard, this area here, the crease of his hip, is vital for him to defend and me to breach. I need to get inside the crease of his hip. But once I've passed his guard, in order to control the position thereafter, it's inside this position here. You can see where my shoulders slotted in just under his chin, and inside this position here, which we class as the underhook. If I can achieve those two positions, it's going to be very, very hard for him to escape. Okay? He'll still be able to escape. There's some methods that he can use to claw back the control from his point of view. But if I'm able to achieve those two positions, I'm going to be in a much better position than if I don't have them, okay? So, to give you a little bit of context on how we arrived there, let's look at the guard pass. So if I start in your full close guard, we all understand the basics by now of passing the full close guard, right? We're not going to get into the concepts and the principle, but essentially we're looking to achieve good base, build from the floor up, then a strong posture so we can't get broken forward, and we'll provide some kind of structure for this posture using our grips. Okay? Because he has to collapse our structure or continue our structure in order to stop me from passing his guard. My free hand is going to grab a 4-finger pocket grip, and I'm going to hold that arm in. Then we can start to stand. So let's say I stand, I let go of his lapels, I stand, lift his shoulder off the floor, and I start to open his guard. This is the point where if I've opened his guard, I'm now passing guard. Okay? He knows from a retention point of view that he has to achieve 4 grips. Okay, so he's got his hold of my grips on my cuffs, that's 2. If he puts both of his feet in my biceps, he's now achieved the position that you would know as spider guard. So now it's going to be much, much harder for me to pass the guard. That's the first rule that he has to achieve. Well, let's say I break these grips off and I disengage. Once I've disengaged, I'm not just going to stay here, I'm going to start to cut the angle. If I cut the angle, he knows that now I'm further into my pass, so he will realign himself by taking his head back in line with my head and achieve that angle back. So we're square up again. He still doesn't have those 4 grips, so he has to get those back. Okay? But let's say I'm at distance and he doesn't have the 4 grips. I cut the angle, but this time he doesn't recover. Well, now he knows if I start to encroach and close the distance, that's the next issue he's got to attend to. So as I start to close that distance to pass his guard, he's going to shrink away from me. Now he'll recover the angle, and all of a sudden we're back into him maybe achieving those 4 contact points. Okay? The last part really is then, once I've got separation from him and I start to cut the angle, I start to close the distance. Well, once I've closed the distance, I have to level change and achieve this position by the crease of his hip. Okay, he will maybe start to frame to keep me away, which will then feed into his shrimp, which will then feed into his guard retention, the angle back, and there's his 4 contact points, and I've not passed his guard. That's the way he would look at, in a very, very basic sense, to recover or retain guard once I've passed it. Okay, he needs to understand that if that retention isn't working, the position is lost. And he needs to start being proactive from his back to achieve the escape from the next position, that being side control. And that's where he's going to start to hide my ability to underhook, hide my ability to control his head and make good an escape. So this is the point where we have to start realizing and appreciating that we've passed the guard, but we haven't been able to achieve control at the side control position. So let's just run through that for you. I'm in his full closed guard. I get my grips, I have my base, I have my posture, everything's set. I start to stand in the correct manner. Okay, nice and strong, I open his guard. I've disengaged, I start to cut the angle. I start to encroach, I start to level change, and he's lost the ability to do everything to claim that back. So now he's accepting that I'm passing his guard. As I start to come down, he's going to hide the underhook, put it across his belly. He's going to hide the ability for me to control his head, and we end up in this position. Okay, so if at any point you find yourself in this side control position and his underhook is reaching around my back, this is the point that you have to act. Okay, and we're going to look at 3 stages of action, if you like. We'll just discuss the layer 1 tonight, or stage number 1. Early understanding or early appreciation of the danger of this underhook. We'll do a couple of other videos where we look not so much at early, but late, and then very late, okay? There's no mid-ground between early and late. There's no like intermediate. You've either appreciated the dangers of this underhook, or it's too late and you have to do something else, okay? Let's look at the early sort of precautionary techniques that we need to apply. Remember, prevention is always better than a cure, so we always want to act early, okay? We want to appreciate that we've lost this, okay? So, if I'm in this position, I have no ability to control his head. I have no ability to lock myself in with the underhook to control him in order to get his back flat on the floor and hold him in that position. Okay? Incidentally, if I have control of his head, so I have one of the grips, but not the underhook, it doesn't really give me too much in the way of control. If he just dips his chin down, okay, and I start to put him flat by driving him down, he's still able to lift that underhook and I'll just slip off the top of his head. You can see how precarious I am now with him on my back. Okay, so you could very well say, yeah, okay, well, what happens if I have the head? If you've got someone that can just grit it out, they will just get out anyway. They'll take you back, okay? However, if I don't have his head, so defend your head, but I have the underhook, well, that's a different kettle of fish. As I said earlier on, underhook is key. Okay, if he tries to escape now, I can pin him just by having my underhook. But if I'm relying on just the head and he has the underhook, not a chance. Okay, so in the perfect world, we want both of them. However, we haven't got either. He has his underhook and he's here. Okay, so the first thing we have to understand is the depth of his elbow. His underhook is only as good as it is deep. In the same vein or the same understanding that a choke is only as good as it is deep. There's a certain depth that he has to achieve with this underhook so it's functional, okay? And we can measure that depth. We have a benchmark, and the benchmark is his elbow. So if I allow my training partner's elbow to sort of disappear behind me so I can't really see it, that's when he'll be able to bridge into me and use that lever to escape. Remember, go back down. So remember, at the moment when I land, this is a frame. Okay, and he's framing me off of him. he turns that frame into a lever and escapes. In the same way, you turn a frame into a lever and a lever into a frame. So we've talked about the depth of the elbow. So as soon as I land here, the first thing I should acknowledge is the fact I've got side control, I've passed the guard, but I have no control in the side control. So I'm going to shift my emphasis back over his elbow. So I know that the bend of his elbow, just bend your elbow for me, bend it, is there. If I allow that elbow to creep behind me, I lose the position. So if I land in this position after passing his guard, the first thing I'm going to do is shift my weight back and pinch my own elbow to his side. We can test this. Can you lever me up now? So I want you to jack me, jack, jack. So he can do it, but it takes a few attempts. He sort of has to jack, 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 jack. The next thing then, we appreciate now that the elbow is the key. Well, watch the way, or watch his mechanics of jacking me up. Watch what he has to do with it up. You see that? Go back again. He has to bring his chest to his chin to his chest in order to explode. So to help that, forget about this arm now. Okay, to help the fact that I've killed his ability in the earliest sense by pinching and shifting my weight here, I'm just going to take my free hand and stick it on top of his furthest shoulder. When he lifts up, brings his chin to his chest to start to lever me up, I'm going to beat him to that position and put my forearm underneath his chin. The moment he starts to jack me with this underhook, I'm just going to lift his chin up. Really try now. Okay, so you can see that I have a little bit of control back in the situation just by breaking his posture. Okay, so remember, posture, let's define that. Posture is you holding yourself in the strongest possible sense relative to the position you're in. It doesn't always mean having perfectly straight backs. You know, as kids you're told in class to sit up straight, have good posture. That's okay if you want to look neat and tidy, but in terms of jiu-jitsu, no. We spoil the posture by breaking the posture forward, by pushing the posture back, and by tilting and twisting the head. Any way we see fit to disrupt the posture that he needs and is required from the relative position he's in is what we have to do. So in this sense, in order for him to regain that underhook, he's going to bring his chin to his chest and start to breathe. You see how that disrupted my base? Go back again. So I have to do the opposite. I have to stop his chin coming down early by fixing my hand towards my, on his far shoulder and using my frame now as a lever, like he's trying to do here. Okay, you saw how he was still able to work me up eventually. So I'm going to combine this sort of grip over his shoulder with this frame, with this lever, and I'm going to tilt my body this way, almost like a scarf hold kind of position, but so that I'm able to walk my butt back at the same time as lifting up his chin. Try now. So all of a sudden I've become very, very heavy. Okay? So let's just recap on what we've done. I've passed his guard, but I wasn't able to control him at the side control position because he was very savvy and hid that arm. If he turns in and he leaves this sort of gap here, so you can see maybe a silhouette from the back, that's where I'll find that underhook and flatten him down. But he hasn't done that. He's been very good and kept it in. So I just haven't appreciated that too much until I've landed on it. But now, early thoughts. The depth of the elbow is key. I bring myself back past the elbow. I know now that he's got to bring his chin to his chest, so I fix my grip and I start to lever him up. Now what I have to do is not allow my weight and my base to be thrown forward, so I switch my base down the bottom and just sit back here. If he tries to lever me up now, all of a sudden I've become much, much heavier than I was. So that's one way we can do it. Another way, let's say I've passed his guard, he's hidden that arm, I've landed on top of him, I have side control with no control. From here now, if I'm not able to move myself back past that elbow joint, what I can do very quickly, if he reaches around my back again, is underhook his leg. So now, I'm not able to frame the chin and use my forearm like a lever. I'm not able to turn my body to alleviate or mitigate the movement by shifting my base. But if he tries to lift me with his underhook now, not only is he lifting me, he's lifting himself. So really try. It's very, very hard. The one thing we have to worry about here is if he's savvy to my counter, is him countering my counter to his counter. So as soon as I feel that underhook come through, and maybe I slot my arm through here, if he takes his underhook out and pushes my head between his legs, well, now I'm caught with my hand and my head in between his legs. If he's able to pull my forearm across and squeeze, he has a triangle. Even though if he's not able to pull my arm, he locks his legs off, and I frame here to allow the blood to flow in my neck so I don't get choked. Well, now this arm is susceptible to Kimura. So we're here. So you've got to be very careful. And just like he's savvy and he's accepting the pass and he buries every opportunity for me to control him, I also have to understand that there's a counter to a counter to a counter. So the moment I start to pass and he's hidden that and he starts to seek the underhook, I throw my hand through here. But the moment he pulls his underhook out, I pull mine out and I secure the control that I wanted in the first place. Okay? Let's rewind just a little bit and go over how we can not only kill the underhook by lifting the chin and shifting our weight, but achieve the underhook, which is what we wanted in the first place. So, back to the first one. I've passed his guard, I've landed on this underhook, and he starts to go deep. Remember, depth of the elbow is key. So I shift my weight back and I pinch his elbow. I shift my base so I'm heavier this way. Incidentally, keep your head down nice and low, because if I'm back here, my weight goes that way. So I stay here, I cup his far shoulder. As soon as he buries his chin, I lift. Well, now we don't just want to sit here, because eventually he will either bump me up, or maybe he'll pull this arm free and start to frame me backwards. Okay, so what we have to do now to regain the control that we wanted at this underhook is the moment he tries to bury his chin and lift me and I flare, soon as I feel him relax, I'm going to lift what now is an overhook, remember, and I'm going to drive the point of my elbow down through this crease. From here now, I'm going to switch my base so that I go again south of his elbow. I flare, punch the mat, and drive my hand underneath to achieve my underhook position. Okay, now that's the underhook from side control. In the early sense, we've passed, we've appreciated that we've lost all forms of control, so now we have to think about how we're going to regain the control. The same can be said from half guard. If I'm here, a very common position that your partner on the bottom will play is this knee shield, or Z guard, sometimes called 93 guard. If I'm not aware of leaving space open through here, he's going to achieve an underhook from there. Simply, if he just puts his hand on his knee and avoids me from controlling his head on this side, wherever he kicks this leg through now, that arm goes and he finds this underhook position. And he's going to keep that position just by putting this hand on the floor. Again, if he puts his head underneath my chin, he's spoiling my posture. Right? I might look like I've got great sort of upright posture, but it's not conducive with what I want to do. Remember, posture is you holding yourself in the strongest possible sense relative to the position you're in and what you're trying to achieve from that position. If you understand that, it will unlock lots of potential doors down the line. So let's have a look how we can stop that. His hand is on his knee, he's on his side, he's in this fetal position, the correct posture. He's blocking me from attacking his head. He sits up and kicks through. Lost the underhook. The first thing really I want to do is create space through it. Do not overhook at this point and try and push him back down to the mat. If I do that, he'll drop down to his elbow. He'll grab the inside of my trouser pants, so palm up. And as I force him down, all he'll do is just roll me over this way. So by me being a little bit impetuous with an overhook, thinking sort of brute force and ignorance will put him down to the mat, he'll just switch that position straight away. So the moment, remember we're talking about early recovery, early retention. Just come back this way a little bit. An early appreciation of the underhook. We haven't talked about what to do when he starts to use the underhook now. We've just appreciated the depth of his elbow is starting to slip away from us. So the moment he now starts to sit up and kick through, I have to back away a little bit and first things first, I suppose, is just jam that hip. So my hand, if we go this way, you can see he started to achieve that underhook, but his elbow, he wants to get it all the way around the back of him. The moment that I see that I'm losing the position, I jam the hip and I start to create some separation here to mitigate the depth of that elbow. As soon as I've done that, my free hand no longer wants to control his head, it wants to frame his head. So I'm going to start to, same kind of thing as before from side control top where we leave at the chin, but now it stops him coming into me. So if you try to drive into me, I'm keeping the upper center away from closing the distance on my upper center, and he can't encroach with his lower center either. Well, now in that space, I'm able to drive my elbow, not my fingers. I won't drive my fingers in because it flares my elbow, and we're always taught to keep our elbows close, right? So the moment I jam and disengage somewhat, I drive my elbow through, find the head, and I'm able to control that top position. Incidentally, in side control, we have 3 areas of concern. Not only is it the neck and the underhook that we have to latch, but we're halfway over this hip crease. So we have to think about managing this bottom leg, whether I pinch or I stamp to control him from recovering his guard. Okay, if I leave this open, he will now bring that leg through the gap and recover full close guard. Here. Okay, so what we have to do, again, from this knee shield position, is the moment this hand comes up, I have to understand there's only one reason why that hand is there. I can't get control of his head, it explodes up. I jam his hip to keep his hips away, and I frame the upper body. Once I've achieved that, I drive my elbow through. There's my underhook, and remember, depth of elbow is important for me now. There's the control of his upper body. I drive flat, and I just have to ensure that I control this bottom leg, either by stamping on it or pinching. And if I am going to pinch, I have to be careful of my base behind me. Okay? But that's generally a way for you to mitigate the threat, I suppose, of the underhook from side control and half guard. Okay? And again, one of the sort of core adages that we use in class about managing the threat, removing the control in terms of submission escapes, or position escapes as well, is very, very prevalent in this. I have to manage the threat. The threat in this early stage of the underhook is the depth of his elbow. And I manage that by acknowledging it, shifting my weight back, and levering his ability to bump me through. And after I manage the threat, I'll remove the control. I drive in my elbow through and achieving the underhook myself from side control. Or I was able to frame his upper center and his lower center from the half guard, drive my elbow through and achieve that underhook. Okay, so we can assume that could be part 1 of the underhook issue. And I'll give you another video in a couple of days on late recovery, late retention, and then we'll do a 3rd installment, if you like, of very late understanding of the use of the underhook. Okay.